Welcome to the Grampians Wine Podcast. I'm your host, Neil Butler. In each episode of the podcast, we speak to a representative of the Grampians winemakers or one of the wineries in the region. We'll learn about the wines, the wineries, and of course, the personalities associated with one of Victoria's leading wine regions. Today, I'm pleased to reintroduce Simon Clayfield from Clayfield Wines, who's going to talk to us about some legends of the Grampians wine region, each of whom are sadly no longer with us. Welcome back, Simon.
Hello, Neil. Good evening.
Great to see you again. Now, it may seem like a sad topic to spend time on today, but we're going to salute three absolute legends of the region. Who are we remembering first, Simon?
Well, firstly, we're going to remember Trevor Mast, who was a famous vigneron from best well known from Best Wines. And don't put me on the spot here. I can't remember exactly when he died, but it was probably 10 years or more ago. Trevor, funny enough, Trevor was at Best when I first started there, and he moved on to, he bought Mount Langy Duran vineyards as we know it today. It was called Fratton Brothers then, and they sold it to Trevor, and he's done wonders with it since then, up until his demise. But Trevor and I shared something from the very first day, which I find very poignant. And when I arrived at Best, he had to take me up to Swan Hill to the Best vineyard at Lake Boga and introduce me firstly to the winery staff up there. And also after that, we went out and visited some of the growers. It was late December. The grapes were ripening. And it was important to go and see the growers up there that Best bought grapes from, and they bought grapes for some of their table wines, but also for their fortified wines and distillation and so forth like that. And on the way up there from Great Western to Lake Bow, you go through Donald and so forth. And we get about an hour into the trip, just past Donald, and he pulls over. And I said, "Oh, what are we doing?" He said, "We're stopping." I said, "Yeah, I can see we're stopping. What for? His cup of tea?" I said, "Oh, beauty. I was dying for a cup of tea." So then he pulls out the thermos flask. We sit on the bank of a river and we have a cup of tea together from, the old enamel mugs.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I love tea. And that's when Trevor and I first thought, yeah, he's a good bloke, I'm a good bloke, sort of thing. And and I remember that moment, because after that it sort of broke the ice and we'd started talking a bit about ourselves, and we got to Lake Boga and did the whole thing, and that was good. And Trevor was a down-to-earth bloke, and we call him, or I used to call him, the guru of Shiraz from this area, because he knew all about it. He was always there to give people a helping hand in their viticulture experiences and winemaking experiences. If you had any questions, Trevor would know the answers. No doubt about that.
Yeah, it's something that seems to come through in the conversations we've had so far. There is a real camaraderie between the wineries, and certainly you are competitors, and I guess there's a little bit of one-upmanship in terms of my wine's better than your wine going on, but there seems to be a real camaraderie and a commitment to each other to make sure that sort of knowledge isn't lost, that it's shared around.
Yeah, pretty important. The Grampians, fortunately, is a small area. Having worked in the Hunter Valley and the Barossa Valley and Coonawarra in the past, much bigger areas, the numbers of winemakers are just vast compared to here. We're a family in this area. We know each other pretty intimately. We talk regularly. We have our Grampians winemakers meetings. We share knowledge and information. There's no secrets. What goes on goes on, and we all got pretty good wine. So when you say, we all like to think we've got a better wine than the next bloke, you put them side by side, and there's different DNA in the wines, but they're all pretty good. All pretty good.
Yeah, and I guess you've mentioned it, and certainly others have as well in other episodes, the role of the Best Wines organisation in terms of being a breeding ground for people who are learning the trade and coming and doing what you've done now. And Trevor was obviously an intimate part of that role.
Definitely was. Trevor was very fortuitous that Trevor arrived in Great Western when he did, because he first went to Seppelt's, having studied winemaking over in Germany. He came back to Australia and he got a job at Seppelt's. I may stand corrected, but I think it was primarily for sparkling wine production.
Mm.
And I don't know how he went to Bess, but I think he just looked at it and thought, I could fit in there and do something good there.
Mm.
And he went over and got a job there, and he ended up being there for 12 years. In that time, Bess was still, let's say, established, but a rudimentary winery, still being made in very traditional methods. Nothing really fancy. It was, it was, as you know, the quality of the vine is made in the vineyard, and that's Best legacy of having vines going back to the 1860s. The quality is no doubt. But what Trevor did to Best was to bring them. I don't want to sound like, not bring them out of the dark ages, but introduce some modern equipment and techniques to help them with production, and also to make them more efficient. And he did that, and that was really good. And when I went to Best, I saw some of the things he'd done. He changed from the old antiquated bottling system to a stainless steel bottling equipment, which could be fully sanitized through using hot water and steam and things like that. Good quality corking. Before that, Bess used to reuse bottles, wash bottles, fill them up, hand cork them on an old Tyrex filler, which was an old hand filler, so forth like that. Package them into wooden crates and bin them, and then come back and label them. They did a whole myriad of styles. Well, Trevor, he turned the key on them, and they went a little bit more automated and modern with that. And then when I went there, it went another step down that new path again. But,
sounds like
Trevor was.
Sorry, go on.
Oh no, so Trevor was a pretty smart guy, switched on, and he was at the right place at the right time, and really helped Bess in that time.
Yeah, sounds like an absolute pillar of what is established now as a really vibrant wine environment. Who's number 2 on your list today?
Number 2, Dr. Graeme Bertuch, who sadly passed away a few years ago. Graeme was our family doctor for many years, and when I first came to the area, he was a medical practitioner, but also vigneron for Cathcart Ridge Winery, which is just a few k's west of Ararat, and he established that back in, I think, the late 80s, early 90s. I remember when I went to Bess, he brought some wines along for bottling. That's when I first met Graeme. Very gentle giant, big guy, huge hands. Must have been, I reckon he's the same height as Max Gorn, to be honest with you. He's a pretty tall fella. And
for those who are listening elsewhere, Max Gorn is a very tall player who plays football for Simon's beloved Melbourne Demons Football Club. Sorry, just got to fill in the gaps for those who are listening elsewhere.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Graeme had a passion for wine, and he had done a little bit of a climatic survey where he was able to join the dots between what he thought was the climatic data for Bordeaux in France and his site selection at Cathcart Ridge for growing Cabernet and Merlot, which is quite odd in this area to have those two varieties. But I think he made the figures fit because of the site selection, having the varieties planted on certain sides of hills and so forth like that. Needless to say, I don't think that theory paid out in practice all that well, although some good Merlots did come off that block. But they also grew some Shiraz. It was pretty good. But Graeme was, like I said, medico and self-taught vigneron, and a lot of doctors become winemakers. I think they understand the microbiology involved, the cleanliness, and the process, as do a lot of engineers as well. But he had a little bit of eclectic eccentricity about him when it came to the winery, because the fundamental molecule for the flavonoid chemistry in red wine particularly is the benzene ring or the anthocyanin molecule. A couple of benzene rings joined together, hexagonal rings joined together. And where Graeme built his cellar in the vineyard, he built a studio and a little house there where he could just get away. He also did some painting as well, so he had a studio for his painting. But the buildings were hexagonal shape, the shape of the benzene rings, or the anthocyanin molecule, which I found was a little bit quirky.
Yeah.
But he was quite good, and to give credit's due, on one of his early labels, he actually wrote about the good health properties of wine to give to us, and he even mentioned his label about how red wine in particular can have favourable effects on the ratios between high density and low density lipoproteins, and one of the compounds responsible these days is resveratrol, which in small amounts is in wine and does have these good properties with the cardiovascular system. People don't want to talk about alcohol and its good health benefits these days, because it's all, we have the stupid thing of dry July and sober November or whatever it is, and this hurts the wine industry, and I understand why they're doing it. But Graeme was one of the first out there to proclaim the health benefits of wine, and I'm the same vein too. Wine is a good quality food. It's good for us.
Oh, and I think the other thing is too, it's interesting too, there's a few doctors. Wasn't Dr. Lindemann was a doctor too, wasn't he?
Yep.
But I think the thing that strikes me also about, and it's becoming more and more important, is mental health. And whilst putting away a glass of Shiraz is going to help your cardiovascular system, as you said, not only that, but also sitting around with a couple of friends with a good quality bottle of Shiraz from the Grampian ranges is a good way to unwind and spend time with friends and unwind mentally. I would have thought has that health benefit as well.
Oh, exactly. You mentioned Dr. Lindemann. I think their logo is in vino veritas, which is in wine there's truth. And you sit around with a few glasses of wine, the truth certainly comes out. But but there's good health benefits to be had with wine, and of course there's the French red wine paradox too, is that for years it's noted that the French population have a low instance of cardiovascular disease. Now, people put it down to, how could this be? Is it to do with the diet and the wine? Considering, in the old days, the French, and probably to this day too, they smoke very strong Gaulois cigarettes and things like that, and eat fatty foods. It's not so much about the wine and food. What you intimated was about the well-being. And we can take a page of the Europeans' book and sit down with a nice plate of food, good company, good wine, enjoy it in time, because it's the relaxation. It's taking that moment to step back from the rat race, and that's one of the reasons that myself and other vignerons live out here. Is it's people jealous of our lifestyle, but it's nothing to be jealous of. It's the fortune that we've made for ourselves. It's because it's a lifestyle choice. And coming back to the health aspects of it, that's a lifestyle choice as well. And there's nothing wrong. People go through life without drinking alcohol. Fine, that's up to them. But I don't want to. I have alcohol-free days, but I've got a little thing on my counter out there. A day without wine. Who needs it?
Well, I almost put in mind too that you won't live longer if you're a teetotaler. It just seem longer. I think that's the other component of our third.
Seem a lot longer.
Our third legend of the region who is no longer with us,
Kym Ludvigsen. Kym, a little bit of an enigma to me when I first met him, because he's kind of extroverted, and I've been talking to you quite freely. I'm in my personal space; it's not a problem. But in the public, I'm a little bit quieter. Kym is loud, not obnoxious, but extroverted. Well,
yeah,
he was. And at first, I found it intimidating about Kym. And it wasn't until we both became involved with a cooperative called Grampians Pyrenees Wine Cooperative, and we utilised resources in Ararat of a winery there and local grapes. And the 10 directors we had of the co-op, we exported wine to China. We wound it up in 2013. Like I said, Dr. Bertuch was one of the directors, and he passed away. Kym passed away. So the wheels fell off our cooperative. We lost the impetus for that, and we decided to wind it up. And it's good that we did when we did it, because the way things have gone with China, we would have been pushing the barrow uphill. But Kym, I got to know Kym quite well in that cooperative, and we travelled to China a couple of times together, and I got closer and closer to him, and I found him the most funny guy, loved to laugh, loved life, loved being around with other people, but what was prime, in my opinion, of him was his passion for viticulture. And he used to send out these newsletters to us every month, to the Grampians winemakers. Okay, after a few years, it was the same newsletter, just with a different date on it. But it was telling us about what was due in the vineyard, what was happening, keeping in touch. And at the end, we'd see it'd sign off with your ongoing passion for viticulture. And when I first started my winemaking career, I was a specialist winemaker and wasn't involved with the vineyard side, even though I was trained in viticulture. It wasn't until I left Bess, went to Warramang for a couple of years, and then put my own vineyard in the ground, and then that grew. I tell you what, making wine is fantastic fun, and it's part of the course. Wine makes itself, and we just guide along the way. But the vineyard is a dynamic thing where it really takes your time and effort. And I've got 2.5 days left of pruning to do, and the sap's starting to flow in the vines now, and it's when I start to bud burst through to harvest and see all those changes. Now every time I go there, I'm just channeling what Kym used to say about the vineyard, and he was so important with enhancing my experience in the vineyard, and it makes it more pleasurable. And he's a great bloke, and he put his own vineyard in just on the south side of the Westgate Hill, which is a famous grape growing area in the Great Western region. And his vineyard is perfect. The rows are straight, the vines are trained well, the trellising's immaculate. And this is, when it comes to people with, I don't know if Kym had OCD, but his vineyard's perfect, and mine leaves a lot to be desired. But I got so much admiration for that guy. And he was everyone's friend, always sharing a joke, and hated a beer as well. He hated a beer. We used to go to the Shire Hall Hotel on a Friday night and have a couple of beers with him after our co-op meetings and things. And I'd go home. I said, "What are you going to do?" He says, "I'm going home, have a shower, come back here again to another beer." He was a top bloke.
Well, there's some great memories in there, Simon, and thank you for sharing them. I mean, in most episodes now, we ask our guests a few questions about themselves, but we're not going to do that because you answered those back in episode 11. If you missed that episode, go back and find the conversation I had with Simon in episode 11, and you'll find out all about him. Simon, thanks again for joining us on the Grampians Wine podcast. You're welcome, Neil. It's been fun. That's another episode of the Grampians Wine podcast featuring Simon Clayfield from Clayfield Wines. You can subscribe to the podcast by visiting grampianswinepodcast.com.au. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, but it will give you the chance to listen to previous episodes and to be reminded whenever we publish another episode. You can watch video versions of the podcast by subscribing to the Grampians Wine YouTube channel. We'll be back soon with another episode. My name is Neil Butler. I look forward to your company then. Cheers.